Only got bad things on my mind when I'm with you. And so it goes.
Hey everyone, good afternoon and welcome to CASE 2020. I'm Dr. Christine Gardner. It's my pleasure to serve as the chair of the Department of Communication Arts, Theater and Art at Gordon College. And it's my special joy to serve as a professor for our capstone course, Senior Seminar. And what we're going to be doing this afternoon is hearing from 4 of our seniors. We had a group of 19 this semester that have been working on semester-long senior projects. We're going to hear 4 of those now. And I encourage you to check out some other ones that are pre-recorded and they are available now on the Gordon's website. Look under Case 2020, you'll find them there. Again, join us, come back on Thursday, same time, same place. We'll be hearing from 4 more of our seniors. I have to tell you what a semester this has been. When we started this semester, we all started as a class trying to consider what social needs are out there today, identifying what those problems are in society, and trying to assess how communication can make a difference. That was a challenge, but before all of our seniors, and little did we realize, one of the biggest social needs, certainly of our lifetimes, has occurred with this current pandemic. And I think you'll hear from some of the seniors today the ways in which our current situation has even changed their project and the ways in which they approached those initial social needs that they were addressing. Here's how we're going to do this. I want to introduce all 4 of our seniors and we'll hear from them each in turn. And then at the end, we will have a time for questions from our audience members. So if you take a look at the bottom of your screen, you've got a little Q&A button. At any time, if you'd like to submit those questions, feel free. But I will save time at the end to moderate our conversation and hear from our seniors at the end. So with that, let me introduce our group this afternoon. We'll be hearing in order from Aaron Van Cleef. He'll be talking about project distance. Then we'll go right to Jacob Hersion talking about constant presence, his project. And then Arwen Struthers, she'll be reporting on the DNC, GOP, and SNL. And then finally, we'll hear from DJ McCarthy and his project, the coVIDEO project. So with that, let me turn it over to Aaron.
Hello all, hope you're all doing well. Staying cozy, I bet. So to start us off, originally my senior project was going to be around the concept of micro adventures. So I'm involved with the Levita community and I've been very interested in outdoor education, going outside for a while. And so this whole COVID situation has been really difficult about doing that. So I decided to create the distance project and able to mitigate that. So Project Distance is dedicated to facilitating an adventure and mental health facilitate help throughout this whole situation. So to start us off, like originally none of us could have really expected that our semesters for the large part were cut short. And because of that, there's been an increase of mental health issues, anxieties, just general unrest. And so to deal with this, I decided to create a social media page that would help give out tips for going outside, self-care, and then also how can we like make the most of this time. And so some people might be thinking social media is like sometimes linked to anxiety, depression. Why use social media? Doesn't that kind of distract us? I figured that, well, yes, to some degree, social media can help us connect with other people. And with this whole situation, what better time to see the upsides of the internet and social media than to create a network and community through it. Yeah, so throughout this, I decided that I wanted to reach out to fellow students who were struggling with mental health and also feeling like stir crazy from being inside all day. And so I really wanted to focus on college students at Gordon and a few other universities and the outdoor adventure community. So I started it off right here with the Instagram, and I would try to post on a daily basis. And so here's just a few samples of the work that I did. With one of these, we have I promoted an idea for if you can use the internet to use open source software and create something, that might be cool. Or on the internet, you can use Google Earth and as a flight simulator, and you can try using that. So different distractions that keep you still feeling like you are going on adventures. I also had different story prompts to get people involved and talking to each other. How are we keeping ourselves busy? How are we getting through this? And so here's a couple examples of that. And then attached to those posts were my blog. And in this blog, this is the homepage. I could provide examples of continuations of those ideas, but with longer readings and links and research that backs it up, continuing those ideas along. So throughout this whole project, what I found was that it had a community impact where it helped people cope with just feeling kind of cooped up, and gave them ideas how to pass the time. Throughout this, I learned a lot about myself and about social media. This was the first time I had ever really played around with the story features or any Instagram things other than posting here and there. And so that was a cool learning opportunity to how to reach out to other people. And then looking at this from a spiritual perspective, I just found people encouraging each other, people staying strong, and just community engagement on those posts. So yeah, that's what I have. We'll give it on to Jacob next.
Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jacob Persian, and today I have the pleasure of teaching you and about my story, constant presence, and the stigma behind mental health. So my story kind of starts this summer. My family and I were watching the Democratic debate, and the issue of mental health was presented, and like great politicians, they all kind of deflected the answer and what the solution could be behind mental health. They all agreed that mental health was a big issue in the United States, but they did not have a solution. And I started to get frustrated, and my family and I decided and started to come up with ideas on what we could do to reduce the stigma behind mental health. I remember my sister saying this great quote, we go to the dentist twice a year, we go to the doctor once a year, but how come we never get mental health check-ins? And so I think there are a couple issues on why there's a negative stigma of mental health in the United States. And the first is there's a underlying stigma behind it, and that if you only need mental health counseling if you have a problem, it's not something that an average person does. And another one is that religion can and should be like capable of providing these benefits for people and not necessarily counseling. And that people who need counseling are not strong enough to deal with the problems of the world. Additionally, I think there's an ignorance to the whole counseling process, myself included. You know, going into my first counseling session, I had no idea what the whole process would entail. And I think that can be very scary sometimes and prevent people from actually going out and pursuing help. And lastly, I think there's a pluralistic ignorance in the United States. Similarly to how the politicians responded to the issue of mental health, people agree that it is a problem, but people aren't doing anything about it. And there's a cognitive dissonance and like a schism in our brains and with our actions between like what we believe and what we're doing. And so what I thought the most effective way to solve this problem of mental health was prayer alongside counseling, and using them both as tools that will increase just the overall benefit of one's life. So what I wanted to do was really take my beliefs that mental health is very important and convert that into actions that I could then tell people about and to serve as an advocate for mental health in the future. I did not want to be one of those commercials you see on TV and 9 out of 10 dentists want to recommend this toothpaste or whatever. Like, and then you're thinking to yourself, is this guy really a dentist? Like, I wanted to be someone that people could look to about it and know about it because they themselves has in fact been through that. And so that's what I did. So I decided to attend counseling sessions every week through Gordon College and their counseling center located in Jenks, in case you had no idea. And counseling, what I learned is it's a platform for people to identify the difficulties and problems that they're having in their lives and come up with solutions to that and how they can better their lives. And it's really effective because it's a process of integrating what you know into your life. And the people that you get to work with, like Dina, who I worked with, are just amazing trained professionals that really promote a healthy relationship and work with you to make goals that are suitable for your life and are encompassable for any area of your life. And for me, that area of the life that I wanted to improve in my counseling sessions was screen time. Coming back from my semester abroad in Italy, I had a hard time kind of adapting back to life here in the United States, and I found myself using my phone for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and that was just something that I needed to change. In Italy, in Orvieto, we had a 2-hour limit for Wi-Fi, and that was something that I thought was really beneficial. So I decided to incorporate what I had learned from my previous semester at Gordon into my life, and so I did that by having a 2-hour screen time limit. And as you can see on the right side, my past couple of weeks have looked exactly like this, fluctuating here and there above the 2-hour limit, but overall remaining consistent. And so what I hope to do from this study was to see how concentration and time management would be affected. And I found that overall, my ability to concentrate in classes increased 50%. I was way more attentive in class, and I was also able to manage my time more effectively. I'm gonna use this little illusion of juggling. When you're starting out juggling, it's way easier to juggle 3 things than juggling 5 things, to say. And using less time on your phone is essentially juggling less balls. So it's way easier to do other things, and it makes you spend your time on other areas of your life. And so what I did was I tried to use this as a way to kind of share my communications background with people and share my story through the use of my photography. And spending less time on my phone, I was able to pursue an even bigger career in photography and do that even more effectively. So my 2 data points were concentration, the amount of times, actually I'll go back, the amount of times my attention was left in a classroom or diverted in a classroom setting. And then that was my quantitative, and then my qualitative data point was the use of my photographs, which I will get to in a second. So from this whole journey, this whole chapter of my life, I'm calling constant presence. I found myself being in and of the world more, finding myself more present, and being able to better understand myself and the people around me. And I was able to develop meaningful relationships with others. But I don't want what I'm doing to be like, my way of life is not better than anyone else's, and I'm not one to judge. And this kind of 2-hour limit that I set on my screen time is only to serve as a template for what counseling has been able to do for me. And I hope to be kind of an example for people that may also want to improve their life or are struggling in some aspect of your life, to be an advocate for people and to be a leader by example. And so what I found that was really specific to me and how I use my time was I was able to use it creatively, which is a byproduct of time management, which can be anyone can use this to their advantage on whatever endeavor they want it to be. And so I created a blog that includes my pictures from my whole experiences, which incorporates life before quarantine, during quarantine, and what it looks like now. And it's just a really, really great milestone for my whole senior year. I'm glad that I'll be able to have this moment to look back on, what my life was like at Gordon College. So I have a couple of tricks and tips for you guys, specifically for counseling, is just to remain optimistic that it is an ongoing process and that you'll see results eventually, but it's really up to you and how much effort you're putting into it. I also encourage you to schedule weekly appointments and keep yourself accountable, and create realistic goals that you can fit into your schedule. Lastly, I have a couple of tricks for just cell phone usage in general. I think it's very important, especially in these times. Just getting away from your phone for a couple minutes and being able to be with the people around you. And so a couple of tricks that I found were really helpful were just leaving your phone in the other room. Phones are built to be very persuasive and gather your attention. And if you can't see them, then you're not aware of them, then they can't be distracting you. And a couple of ways that I found myself being able to not use my phone was engaging the people around me and being constantly present with them. So thank you guys. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me talk. And now I'm going to hand it over to Arwen to talk about her project.
Thanks, Jacob. So I'm really excited to talk to all of you about my project, which is kind of the culmination of both of my majors during my time here at Gordon. It's called the DNC GOP and SNL. And as a communication arts and political science student who's also participated in Exit 17, which is our campus's late night comedy show, I've really found myself passionate about using humor in political ways to encourage people to become politically active. So throughout this project, which was a research essay, I focused primarily on political polarization. Political polarization is really present within our society, and it's basically how on the two ends of the political spectrum, you have small groups who are extremely vocal and really dominate the political sphere. The main issue with this is that it tends to generate rhetoric that alienates the other and contributes to unhealthy political discourse or a lack of political discourse. Now, especially with the approaching 2020 general election and current political tensions that have only been heightened by the coronavirus, it's important for us to examine some of the causes, consequences, and contributing factors for political polarization. And given my own particular interest, I was drawn to the contributing factor of late night comedy shows. So a late night comedy show is television programming that usually takes the form of a talk show or variety show, which uses humor to entertain. And late night comedy shows serve the purpose of entertaining large audiences through developing humor about current events and politics. Traditionally, these late night comedy shows, which have been around for several decades now, focus on current events and poke fun and make fun of politics in a rather nonpartisan manner. While there has for most of the existence of the late night comedy show genre been a little bit of bias towards the left, they've for the most part remained rather neutral. But in the past decade, we've seen a huge shift in the content, the demographics, and in the impact of these late night comedy shows, which is rather left-leaning. We can see this especially through the entrance of now President Trump onto the political scene in the 2016 election. And one component of my research was comparing two debate sketches. So Debate 76 was a Saturday Night Live sketch, and the sketch showed a debate between then President Ford and Governor Jimmy Carter during the presidential election of 1976. The humor throughout this sketch is poking fun at these individuals in silly and goofy ways, and the tone for both candidates is basically the same. They both receive an equal number of laughs, an equal number of time. And for the most part, this sketch is rather neutral politically. However, if we look at the sketch Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton town hall debate, we see how late night comedy shows have shifted, like the content has been experiencing a huge shift. In this particular sketch, there are over 40 instances of laughter made at, in response to 40 jokes. And as a result, we can see the tone and the response, which is the laughter, in very distinct ways. When it comes to Hillary Clinton, who's portrayed by Kate McKinnon, you have an individual who is laughed at in an approving way. The tone of the jokes made about her imply that while she is extremely awkward, she's still super tough and intelligent. And meanwhile, the jokes made about Donald Trump imply that he is vulgar, stupid, and predatory. This shift is huge in comparison to the Debate 76 video. It demonstrates how in political sketches in today's late night comedy show genre, we have content that is extremely favorable towards left-leaning politics and extremely disparaging towards conservative policies and politicians, which introduces us to Dr. Thomas Ford's concept of disparaging humor. Now, disparaging humor is paradoxical because it communicates two conflicting messages. For one, it communicates an explicit message which belittles the target of the humor, while also an implicit message that it's just a joke and it's not to be taken too seriously, and the person telling the joke isn't responsible for the consequences. Typically, disparaging humor is an externalization of prejudice, and it creates an environment where it's acceptable to belittle and speak about others and even act upon that prejudice. Late night comedy shows frequently portraying this liberal, left-leaning politics, which portrays conservative individuals in a disparaging and belittling light, has a huge impact upon demographics and political engagement. We see this through a study conducted by the Morning Consult and the Hollywood Reporter, which explored how 53% of Democrats watch late night comedy, while less than 25% of Republicans consume late night comedy. This is a huge difference because it means these individuals are consuming content and their worldviews are being framed in very different manners. So, particularly with late night comedy shows, I was really drawn to the humorous aspect of it because I believe humor is an incredibly effective tool of communication. To distinguish between the word humor and comedy, humor is the tool of communication. It's, the act of amusing and entertaining, whereas comedy is the genre term. It's the descripting factor. And humor has lots of positive effects. It can help people bond and build relationships. It can help people retain information. And when you're the target of certain kinds of humor, it can actually build up resilience. However, humor has lots of negative effects too when it's employed through disparaging humor, in that it allows us to externalize our prejudices and treat others poorly. So given what we know about humor and late night comedy shows and political polarization, I really wanted to examine what the responsibility of a late night show is, which is based off of neo-Calvinism's concept of fierce sovereignty. And so basically, my research reveals that the late night comedy show has three key responsibilities, which are to entertain, to acquire viewers, and then when relevant and entering the realm of news commentary, a late night show should seek to speak truth to power and encourage citizen engagement. However, one clarifying factor is that a late night comedy show is not the news. We cannot treat the 10 o'clock news segment the exact same as the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, because these late night comedy shows have a huge skew and a huge bias and shouldn't be treated as such. So given all of this that we've really taken into account, my research sort of culminated in this idea of content creation. How can we create content that is suited for these late night comedy shows and is beneficial and isn't disparaging and actually contributes to addressing some of the negative consequences of political polarization? So things that we need to consider when creating content: we need to have a positive attitude, an attitude that isn't interested in destroying or attacking the other, but is interested in creating. We also need to consider the purpose of jokes. Does a joke seek to make people laugh, or does a joke seek to hurt someone's reputation or attack a policy? And finally, something we need to consider is creativity and novelty. Are we sitting back and letting the same impression make the same jokes over and over and over again? or are we creating something new and something entertaining? Because a large part of what makes comedy interesting and exciting is the fact that the audience is kept on their toes. And so because of the limitations, while I originally had planned on actually creating sketches and monologues, I was only able to present 2 ideas. But these 2 ideas for potential content creation would be the first one, which I'm calling the SFEC, which is it's an ad produced by the Six Flags Election Commission, and basically it makes fun of people talking about 2 different experiences at the same time. And so for one, people are talking about their first time voting, but they're also talking about their first time going on a roller coaster. And so you get lots of big, strange reactions that, when properly formatted, could be extremely entertaining and encourage people to become politically active. And then another idea is a parody of Schoolhouse Rock's video, I'm Just a Bill, except it's I'm Just Alone, which would be a fun way to poke at how the federal government does, how debt works, because I'm still not sure and I'm about to graduate college, which is really frightening. But basically this would be a parody exploring student debt and loans. So it'd be engaging and interesting while not necessarily directed at one partisan group. So Dr. Thomas Ford, who is the guy who really helped me explore what disparaging humor is, highlights how people who have an audience, regardless of who they are, whether it's a late night host, a professor, or me in this presentation, should recognize that they need to use humor responsibly, because that humor is an incredible tool of communication. And throughout this project, I learned a lot. I explored how communication and politics are so intertwined, and was able to really express and explore how comedy works. It taught me a lot about how, as I'm looking to the future, what a future in comedy might look like, which is really exciting. And so that is sort of the culmination of my project. Yeah, thank you so much. And that is it for me. And up next, we have DJ.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is DJ McCarthy. My project is called the coVIDEO project. So give me 1 minute to open that up. There we go. All right. So this is the coVIDEO project. I'm going to take you step by step how this all went down. So step 1 to all of our projects was identifying what the problem is. So it's really hard for me in the beginning of the semester. It slowly became even easier, because what isn't the problem right now with our world? Thanks to the coronavirus, many people's lives have changed drastically. Many different companies and industries are having to completely reshape how they work. I'm a discovery TA, and things are just far, far from normal. This goes for teachers who have to now teach online. Medical workers are getting slammed with all sorts of stuff and new protocols. Filmmakers are having to just rethink how they do everything. Farmers are still essential because we still need to eat, but they are having trouble working. And family life as a whole is completely different, especially for college students who now have to suddenly come home. The bigger picture here, though, is that this is, even if we don't see it now, this is going to completely reshape history and completely reshape how we all live our lives. We are currently living through history right now, and life changes are hard for everybody. And so the big question is, how do we make those hardships known so that should something like this happen in the future, we can learn from our past? This led me to create the coVIDEO project because, 1, I like puns. 2, I work a lot with social media and videography for various things, so I can use this to my advantage. The audience is pretty widespread because we're all shifting to mostly indoors all the time. Technology and social media is now more prevalent. And like Jacob was going on about, social media can be used for evil, especially now when there's a lot of misinformation and fear pandering all over regarding the virus. But I still believe that it can be used for good, and it can be used to kind of help spread hope where it's not currently found. So the aim of this project was to help highlight the many changes that all of these people and groups of people are doing. And so how I did this was, it is an Instagram page set up here. So the coVIDEO project is a social media platform and web series that aims to highlight the individual stories of people adapting to the way of life thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, both the good and the bad, because it's important to represent both sides of that spectrum. Oops, there we go. So these are the 5 videos that I managed to make and the 5 people I managed to reach out to. I'm just going to very quickly introduce them. Girl on the far left is Sophia. She heard about this girl in the news who lost her dad, and financial troubles were ensuing in her family very quickly. So she jumped in to help this total stranger create a GoFundMe to help get her back on her feet. Fernanda is an EMT at a hospital, so naturally she is very busy and talks about all the new stuff going on in that field. The girl in the middle is Rebecca. She is an early childhood educator who is doing her practicum currently, but now has to go to teaching online, which is something she is majorly against. And so this talks about what she did about that. Rachel, next to her, works at a dairy farm, and because need for dairy is low now because restaurants and stuff aren't working, the companies had to go through a lot of changes, including killing over 100 cows because they can't afford to keep them alive and can't sell the milk that they're making. And the girl on the far right is Jess, who is a filmmaker studying abroad in California, but now has to come home and do everything from home thanks to all the study abroad programs being canceled. So there are 3 big phases to making films. First is pre-production. And what this looked like for me was having to reach out to people I know or people in the Gordon community. Also, coincidentally, all the men I asked said no. So for now, it's just all females by sheer coincidence. But I had to reach out to people I knew and people in the Gordon community to see if there were any stories I could tackle. Once I heard back from people, I figured out, is their story not only unique and interesting enough, because we're all working from home, that itself is nothing new, but how can I make a story out of what they're telling me that will be engaging enough? Production was the easiest phase because I couldn't do anything because I can't leave my house, nobody else can. So I have to now talk to participants about how they can best explain their story and ask them what I need, how they can film that, and what I need from them to make the story possible. Only one of the 5 girls I mentioned is a comm arts major, so she knew what was up, but the other 4, I had to kind of walk them through the process a little bit. And then post-production was me having to do more research and looking up stuff so I can get more B-roll, more photos and videos to put alongside it to make it more interesting. And then shrink it down to less than 5 minutes, because if you're scrolling through Instagram, you're not going to watch a 45-minute video that comes up. You're probably just going to watch a few minutes. So social media, shorter, either. There were obviously a lot of restrictions. Once again, I can't film it. So if they send me some like not good video quality, that's just the card I've been dealt. But since this is a current event, my like B-roll, which is the film term for stuff happening in the background while people are talking, is limited to just news reporters, because right now news reporters are the only essential videographers. So they're all I have to work on. And this is a current event, so it's not like I can pull from the past. Scheduling is never fun, even when there's not a pandemic. Having people find the time to make all this for me was especially difficult, especially Fernanda, because she works in the hospital. She's super busy. So I'm grateful at all that she got to help me. This wasn't my original project. I was originally going to do a documentary kind of similar to what Aaron was doing, talking about the outdoors and how that can be encouraging, but I can't do that anymore. And if I want the social media platform going, I would need to find ways to make this useful for someone even after this whole pandemic is social media, a short-term enjoyment. Once you put your phone down, you're probably not going to think about it. What I learned is that video quality doesn't always need to be top tier. I've been a video student all 4 years at Gordon, so I'm always like, everything's got to be top quality. I got to master the camera. I got to master all this stuff. But I'm limited to what the camera most people own, which is phones. So how do I? So I just have to deal with not the best video quality, but that's okay. Not only because A, that's what we're all living in, but also B, people kind of understand. So it ended up all working out. People do want to share. I initially offered people a stipend if they agreed to tell me their story, but even like with that, pretty much all the people reached out to me day one about this. So I may have just lost $30. I don't know, but that's not important. Social media is a great way to spread God's word. Again, it can be very evil. It can be very manipulating. I work for Levita, where our big thing is phones are not the best thing in the world, but it can be used in instances like this to spread God's word, to make sure that we're all okay, and to be a light of joy in people's life. Creating nonfiction is very rewarding. I tend to make a lot of fictional comedy stuff. This is my first time dealing with even anything pseudo documentary, so it was really fun to do that for the first time. Like I mentioned earlier, feature length stuff isn't going to work for social media, just attention wise. So 1-minute videos are just as effective, and these small bits of hope can be enough to get people through the day. So that was very fun. If you want to see the 5 videos, I'm not going to for the sake of time, but if you want to see them for yourself, you can find them at coVIDEO_project on Instagram, and they are also on YouTube if you would like to take a look. That's it from me. I am going to hand things back to Dr. Gardner.
Great, thanks TJ, and thanks to all of our student presenters this afternoon. In fact, let me invite all of our student presenters to join me back here on the screen. We'll get us back all in the squares. We'll take some questions from our audience members. Feel free to click on the Q&A, submit some questions. A few have already come in. And let's actually start with Arwen, if we could. Arwen, a question has come in, wondering how you anticipate COVID-19 impacting humor and late night shows. So thinking about SNL and their from home episodes, just wondering if you have sensed any tone shift in those sketches and whether you anticipate any additional non-partisan humor in the future.
So I actually have loved the past few SNLs they've done at home. I think they've been really fun. But one thing that has really stood out to me is how a lot of the actors on Saturday Night Live are also writers. And so in these mini sketches they're doing at home, they are writing the content that they are creating. And so we are seeing how the writing styles of each of these actors is really sort of like coming to form. And so, right, like one actor, Mooney, isn't really political, but then others like Kate McKinnon really are political. So with these at-home episodes, we're seeing which writers and which comedians are a little bit more political than others. As for the future of nonpartisan humor, I don't know if we will see more of it long-term in the future, but I know for the next several months, most of the humor will be very politically charged and very typically left-leaning, which is damaging for both sides of the aisle, I think. But long-term, I'm very curious to see what happens. I don't know.
That's great, thank you, Arwen. Here's a question for Erin. Erin, did you talk to people just from the US or from other countries, and were there any differences?
Yeah, so in my project, I mainly only had followers from the US, but in my personal use of social media, I was actually able to reconnect with some friends in Germany and Ireland. One of my friends, I had met her, she was the seatmate of mine on a plane, and now we are quite close friends just from keeping in touch from social media, and we video chatted for the first time during this break. And so it's cool that everyone is now like technically just a phone call, just a video screen away. And it's really cool to see social media bringing people together.
That's great, thanks, Erin. Here's a question for Jacob. Jacob, a question about any changes that you noticed in the photos that you took after entering quarantine. Do you see any differences like pre-COVID-19 and post, or I guess we're still mid-COVID-19?
Yeah, definitely. I saw a major shift in my photography. At first, I was more intrigued in street photography and capturing little glimpses of beauty here and there. But the more time I spent in quarantine, the more I started to realize the people that I had with me. And I'm so blessed to be able to come from such a great family and be surrounded by such great friends. And that's really what it's all about. So I noticed a shift in away from objects and places, more towards people and what they're doing, and be able to share their stories and my own through themselves.
That's great. Thanks, Jacob. A question for DJ. You just mentioned in your presentation that you had asked some of your male friends to participate, but they all turned you down. What do you make of that? Do you think, is it something about our culture saying something to men that might make them less willing to share?
Maybe. It was more just coincidental. I asked a couple people. Part of it's my fault. Once I realized that I wasn't getting a lot of males to participate, I reached out to people individually. I reached out to the director of outdoor ed. I reached out to one of my other friends who works in a hospital, and they all just didn't have time. So that's just a restriction I had to deal with that I couldn't really control.
All right, thank you. Here's another question, actually for all of our panelists. Just talking more broadly about how COVID-19 has affected your projects. Some of you have addressed this more explicitly, but just to give you each another chance, just to reflect on the current state of the pandemic, and how it affected you, either the topic or just how you were able to complete the project itself. I'll toss it to any of you who want to take that one.
First. So COVID affected my project in two primary ways. One is that I spent a lot more time watching monologues and sketches than I anticipated in my research, which was rather fun. But the other side effect of COVID-19, which was rather disappointing, is that I wasn't able to actually create any of the content that I was sort of hoping would address some political polarization problems like political inaction and distrust of social institutions. The two pieces that I've suggested sort of address serious consequences of political polarization, and I wanted to realize those and wasn't able to. So.
Thanks, Arwen. Other panelists, reflections on that?
Yeah, originally my whole project was about going outside, out into public places and stuff like that. And so, you know, we can't really do that anymore. And so that posed a challenge with my project. And how do I adapt adapt outdoor activities to be socially distant compliant? So instead of grabbing your friend and heading to a mountain by yourself, walk around your neighborhood, but install an app on your phone that identifies birds, and then how many birds can you now identify? So switching up routine. And I think I'm going to add on actually to that. And I learned a lot. You know, it also taught through this whole adaptation process. It really helped me to figure out, like, implement adaptation and making the most of circumstances, just changing things up for the better, making the most. So it affected it for the worst and it affected it for the best. So yeah.
Jacob, did you have a response?
Yes. So I don't think that COVID really had an impact on the overall the process that I was going through. I was still able to continue my counseling sessions through the use of Zoom. So very thankful that technology has been able to provide that for me. And I've also seen like a spark in creativity. Just being in the same environment allows you to see it in a different light. And sometimes you have to get creative in the ways that you want to present that. And I think it's very easy to use new techniques with photography. And there's many examples that you'll be able to see in my photographs about that.
That's great. DJ, did you want to take a shot at that one?
To an extent, mine was kind of, my whole plan was thrown off guard. I initially had written, not a script, but like a story for a movie I could have made, but I wasn't really passionate about it going in, admittedly. So it was kind of like kind of like a bright light there. But in social media, I can do entirely from home. So if I was planning this from the start, something not related to the pandemic, it would have been, I think, fine as it is, minus the not getting to film people part.
Yeah. Here's another question. This one was specific to Aaron and DJ. Thinking about, do you have any plans to continue running your social media even after this project is completed? And then I would add, as the pandemic continues, do you think that's going to have an impact on the kinds of things that you would do with your projects?
I think it's easy for me to think like, oh, once this vaccine is created, we're officially done. But there'll still be restrictions. There'll still be, I guess, cautious people in the world. But I could imagine even after the pandemic is long gone, name aside, I could still do stuff about focusing on mental health, focusing on like other significant life changes that people will come up with for different reasons. But admittedly, it will be hard for me to stay motivated to update it once it's no longer for grade, but we'll see what ends up happening.
Aaron, for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to continue doing this project. I think, I think it's important for online communities to be consistent. I think in this times where everything's up in the air, everything's so uncertain, then if we have some page, some sort of consistency that some of us can latch onto, that can be really helpful. And so I would love to continue that on. And then even from after this thing comes to an end, as it will, I would love to see how that might evolve. But also, like DJ, it might be hard to stay motivated, but I will do my best. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Arwen, back to you with a question. Just thinking about the partisan breakdown in these shows, do you recognize either a comedian or a show that is maybe less partisan than others? And also, is it possible for people to consume the humor that reinforces their perspectives?
Yeah, so when it comes to these late night shows, Jimmy Fallon is pretty much across the board who people think is the most neutral. As you go further on down towards Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers, they're much more political. But that's also because of the nature of Jimmy Fallon's content. It's less about politics and a little bit more about guests and games. So the content really does impact whether or not a host is going to be more politically active and politically vocal. And then the second half of that question, which was
let's see, that shows that reinforce our perspectives. Is it possible to are people gravitating to those?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think with humor, because of the nature of a lot of the humor that's being employed, there's a person sort of telling the joke and there's the target of the joke. And if a particular group of people feels that they are always the target of the joke and never feel that the person telling the joke is doing any self-deprecation, they're going to be much less likely to engage. And as a result, stereotypes on both sides are developed.
That's great, thank you. And thanks audience members for these good questions. Keep them coming. We still have a few more moments left in our time together. Panelists, here's a question from one of our audience members for all of you. Reflecting back on your time at Gordon, what helped you prepare most for completing your final project? This is a capstone after all. So what would you identify as something that helped you complete this project? I'll toss it open to anyone who wants to.
I can take that one.
Right.
Yeah, I really want to thank Gordon for the kind of overall experience. Just being able to engage and learn in a variety of environments has been incredibly effective in learning. Just going over my past year has been completely crazy. I started past summer with an internship, being able to learn, in a hands-on, in the field kind of, and then going abroad in the fall and being able to study in a complete foreign different place, and then coming back and studying in the classroom, and then Corona happens here, and now we're forced to go online. It's really taught me how to be flexible, and how to be open to these experiences and take them optimistically one day at a time.
Thanks, Jacob. Someone else?
I
What
think-
helped prepare you?
I think for me, one thing that Gordon, specifically as like a liberal arts institution, has really forced me, that really like helped me in preparing for this project, was how connected everything is and how we can critically analyze lots of different things, and they're all connected. I remember coming to Dr. Gardner and I had a bunch of different ideas, and one was more like political polarization, and one was doing something with comedy, and I wanted to do lots of different things. But because of the nature of this institution and help from professors, we can recognize how interconnected this world is. And that actually was able to help me sort of develop the thesis for this project and really prepare me for life outside of Gordon.
Thanks, Arwen. DJ or Aaron?
I remember one of the basic rules of filmmaking I learned back freshman year was stuff is always going to go wrong when you're planning a film project. Was not expecting pandemic to ever be one of those reasons, but oh well. Kind of the ability to roll with the punches was a big one for this. But also I never really saw myself going into like social media or marketing or anything like that. I wanted to be like a filmmaker making TV shows since the beginning. But thanks to like experiences I have with Gordon doing that, that's kind of like what I want to pursue for the most part now. So thanks to this, I kind of have something to work off of for getting myself ready for that.
Yeah, I think piggybacking off of DJ a little bit, just learning to roll with the punches, expect things to go wrong. I think, just honestly, just going through the college experience taught me a lot about perseverance and sticking with things. And I think, when you have an idea, it's easy to start a bunch of ideas, but it's harder to stick with something and follow through. And I think, this is, just learning to follow through, and it's been good. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you all. Let's see, I think we have time for a couple more questions. Let's see, let's go back up to, I'm looking through some of our questions. Jacob, let's toss it back to you. Did you find your relationships with friends improved when you reduced your screen time, or did you end up feeling more disconnected because of social distancing? It's an interesting time to look at social media at a time when we're all separate.
Definitely. I saw an immediate impact in the quality of my relationships. Being more able to connect with people and having a more open dialogue really allowed it to be more of a two-lane street and more vulnerable to other people's perspectives. So I found myself more empathetic, definitely, to other people's positions. And lastly, I think that what I've been doing with the 2-hour limit has been good because it allows for some communication, but you're not completely off the grid. You have to be very strategic when you're planning what you're doing. And I found that I've been very intentional when I have been using my phone or any of these social media. I mean, I've been using them with a purpose, definitely.
That's great, thanks. I know we're just about out of time. If there are any other questions, feel free to offer those up to the group. Let's see, Arwen, another question for you was actually related to gender roles in these late night shows. Why do you think all the hosts of late night shows are male? Any significant female roles in SNL? Any thoughts on that relationship between gender roles and political humor?
Yeah, I think we see huge gender roles at play when it comes to late night comedy. There is one show, I think it's called Full Frontal with Samantha Bee on HBO, where it is a woman, but that's basically the only one when you look at the top 10, top 15 late night comedy shows. Saturday Night Live is a little different because the cast is pretty equally split, but from what I understand, the writer's room tends to be more male heavy. I think this is largely because as a society, we tend to think men are funnier. We think And you know, it's just sort of something that's ingrained in our society, and that's something we need to fight against. But it extends beyond late night comedy, because if you go on Netflix and you look at all their comedy specials, 1 in every 6 will be a woman, which is crazy to me because women are really funny and this needs to change. But yeah, I think we see huge gender roles at play, and it's not something that's addressed or recognized. And I think it's actually an area that late night show hosts could really poke fun at, to encourage people to show interest in female comedians and female comics. So yeah.
Great, thanks. We're just about out of time. I have just a couple more questions if I could ask any of the panelists to respond to this. What surprised you in the process of doing this research? So certainly the pandemic, I know, surprised all of us, but is there anything else that you learned from your project that maybe you didn't anticipate going into this? Maybe you thought, this is the one thing that I'm gonna discover, and you learned something else or something in addition? What surprised you about this project? Maybe surprised I asked you that question.
I think one thing that surprised me was, I like sort of mentioned this before in the question when I talk about how the liberal arts institution has taught me not to think in like specific boxes and how everything's connected. But I remember sitting trying to figure out how to, you know, transition throughout my research essay. And I had one friend suggest, I'm like, oh, like, why don't you think of a late night comedy show as a social institution and view it through the lens of neo-Calvinism's pure sovereignty, which is a very political science, like, theory thing. And so it's just sort of like, oh, like, this is another area of connection that I would never have experienced or anticipated without help from someone else or help and experiences in this other major. So.
Great, thank you. DJ or Jacob, Aaron?
Yeah, one thing that really surprised me was at the beginning of my research was just how many people were unaware of the process of counseling. And so that kind of shaped my whole process of how can I make the process of counseling available to everyone.
Great, thanks.
I know I was surprised how much people were willing to help me. I remember the first day I sent out like a SOS on student news, I got like 6 or 7 emails back the next day, which I wasn't expecting. But also like people were really motivated to help me out and see this through. Because I know like for me, since it's been online, I've just been super unmotivated to do any schoolwork. Like one of the girls sent me like 50 minutes telling her story, and I'm like, okay, this is more than I could ask for. So it's been really awesome to see people come together to help me out.
Yeah. Honestly, I was just shocked by the amount of resources and project ideas there are out on the internet that were available to share. For one, there is a site where you can control a tour guide in the Faroe Islands, like a video game character. They have a GoPro on their head, and you virtually direct them where to go. So yeah, there's just a lot of cool stuff out there.
That's great. Thanks, everyone. I know we are right at time. Each of you want to give us the quick, like 20-second update on what's next for you, maybe connecting it to your project, even if you don't know what your plans are, right? Everyone's plans are up in the air at this moment, but even any hopes for plans once things get settled. Where do we hope to be seeing you in the future? Arwen, are we going to be seeing you on one of these late night shows?
Yeah, tune in to The Late Show with Arwen Struthers in 20 years. It'll be great.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Aaron, what are your plans, do you hope, in the near future?
In the near future, I hope to be moving into a van and doing some photography across the globe. I think it would be cool to go from Alaska all the way down to Chile. So let's see how that goes. Or I'll just hang out here in Massachusetts and do video stuff. We'll see what happens.
That's great. Jacob, what about you?
Yes, I'm hoping to pursue a career in marketing, and ideal career would be something in the sports, working for the Bruins or the Patriots or something along those lines.
That's great. DJ, some film projects?
For now, I hope to get some form of a job. I haven't got. Right now I'm set to be a camp counselor this summer, but afterwards I would like to pursue. I should see myself pursuing social media. At some point, I want to go on and make TV shows, specifically kids shows, because I feel like that's what I'm passionate about. But we'll see what ends up happening. At this point, I'm just going with the flow right now.
That's a good place to be. Thanks again to all of our panelists, Aaron, DJ, Jacob, Arwen, thank you for your good work. And for all of our audience members, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Just to give you a heads up, please go to our website, gordon.edu/case2020. So you can see these social media accounts, DJ's videos there, you've got Arwen's analysis is there, all of the stuff is there. As well as our other seniors, our projects, their work is being uploaded as we speak, probably. At least I know stuff's been going up today. So do take a look at that and then come back again on Thursday. We've got 4 more students going to be presenting their work. Before we wrap up, just big thanks to Nick Hammis and CTS for his help putting this whole thing together, Ryan Canister, our fine arts manager, and again, thanks to our seniors. Congratulations, almost done. And that is it. We will sign off here. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.